Welcome to the First Nations Health Managers Association's weekly town hall, your resource for the latest COVID-19 related news and information. A town hall for us, by us. Over the next hour, you'll hear from health professionals and community leaders covering a range of health topics that impact Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Send us your questions to fnhma@ihtoday.ca. We want to hear from you. And now your host, Marion Crow.
Tansei from the Nation Talk studio in the home of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Huron. This is the First Nations Health Managers Association weekly town hall. I'm your host, Marion Crow from Pie Pot First Nation in Saskatchewan. It is such a pleasure to be joining you again. And just for those who haven't seen us before, let me tell you, if you have a question for any of our panelists, our subject matter experts, please send those questions anytime to FNHMA@ihtoday.ca. And a special thank you to Indigenous Health Today at Nation Talk for being the collaborators of all these amazing partnerships. We know that one person can make change, but 100 in collaboration can cause major change. So thank you to our partners and to everyone working behind the scenes to get this show to you. We have an exciting show. We're actually going to talk about mental wellness. Are you guys COVID-19 fatigued? I'm sure you are. I know I am. But you know who's exhausted? Your community health workers, nurses, doctors, psychologists, mental wellness workers, IRS, health directors. Show some love to your healthcare teams in your nations, in your organizations. We love you. Thank you for keeping us safe. It is such a privilege to have a co-host today. I am so delighted to have First Peoples Wellness Circle joining, giving us all that amazing content, and we'll get to Dr. Brenda Ristool shortly. But first, we are going to invite our partner, Indigenous Services Canada, to give us those amazing stats that are happening all across Turtle Island with respect to COVID-19. So, a guest favorite, our very fierce redhead, come on in. Kim Daly, come on into the Crow's Nest. Welcome back. Happy New Year.
Yes, it's good to be back here. Thanks for having me back. I'm just going to update you guys. As you alluded to, I am Kim Daly, and I am the acting director now at the Communicable Disease Control Division here at First Nations Inuit Health Branch. I'm excited to join you again. I enjoyed my times here last time with spreading knowledge and helping with questions. So excited to be back here. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the traditional and unceded territories of Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, where I'm honored to live and work. As Marion said, this COVID-19 pandemic has presented challenges and lessons for all Canadians, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, and First Nations, Inuit, Métis living in urban, rural, and remote communities. The First Nations, Inuit, Métis communities and organizations have responded with leadership, resiliency, innovation, care, and compassion in order to protect their community members and those they serve. And as Marion said, we can't stop thanking them for that. This is a long journey that they continue to go on. And we're very impressed with the leadership we continue to see each and every day. I'm going to provide you with an EPI update regarding COVID-19 in First Nations communities. So first, I'll start with the case rates. So as you know, First Nations communities are increasingly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. As of January 26, 2022, the First Nations on reserve had twice as many active cases as general Canadian population. This was a decrease from December 10th, 2021, when the rate among First Nations was 2.21 times that of other Canadians. So that's a success. We'll take that. That's a good news story. The cumulative COVID-19 rate in First Nations communities has exceeded the rate in Canada as of December 17, 2020, and it's currently 2 times the rate of the general population. The hospitalization rate is about 64%, the hospitalization rate of the general population. The case fatality rate in First Nations communities is 82% of the respective rate of Canadian population. It is of considerable concern that the rates of cumulative cases in First Nations on reserve in all ages groups except those age 80 plus now markedly exceeds COVID-19 rates in the general Canadian population groups in the same age. So that's something, it bears repeating that is the concern. This is why we must stay vigilant, why we must continue to go the course that we continue on. So I'm going to talk to you about those, what we can continue to do. And I do hear it every day how we're exhausted, but now is not the time to let up on this, because if you look at those rates, we need to continue to go on this journey. So as of January 25th, 687 communities have access to vaccine clinics. 1,443,188 doses have been administered. Of that, 410,577 were second doses. So not quite half, so we're getting there. We really need to uptake that second dose. So when you're talking to somebody, we used to have a real proud thing to say, I got vaxxed. Now I'm double vaxxed. Now we want to talk about boosters too. And 107,051 were third dose in First Nations, Inuit, and territorial communities. Over 86% of individuals aged 12 plus have received a second dose, but that's just not enough. Over 43% of individuals 5 to 11 have received at least one dose, and that's the next age group that we're really trying to target. Although COVID-19 vaccines approved for use in Canada provide substantial protection against severe illness, no vaccine is 100% effective, and protection may decrease over time. We call that waning immunity. And many of you have heard me say this before, but measles, mumps, and rubella is a vaccine you received as a kid, and we found that the waning immunity came. Why did it come? A couple things. People didn't all get immunized, and so it was still remained. We want to eradicate this. We want to get rid of this. And we've done that with diseases, and I believe we can do that again. So this is where we're seeing the third dose needing for some age groups. And I know people are exhausted and think this hasn't happened before, but we've had this with other vaccinations. Fully vaccinated individuals can still be infected and transmit the COVID-19 virus. But it's important to remember it's less likely to occur among fully vaccinated individuals than those who are unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. Despite those caveats, vaccination, including booster dose when eligible, remains to be one of the most effective ways to protect our families, communities, and ourselves against COVID-19. Vaccines are effective at preventing severe illness, hospitalization, and death from Omicron and other variants. We cannot forget the other public health measures. So given the high transmissibility of Omicron variant and the existing factors that contribute to the disproportionate risk of COVID-19 in First Nations living on reserve, ISC issued a new guidance on public health measures on December 30th, and this included the use of medical masks being recommended for anyone who has tested positive for or has symptoms of COVID-19. People who live in an overcrowded setting with someone who has tested positive or has symptoms of COVID-19. People who are at risk of more severe disease or outcome from COVID-19. People who are at higher risk of exposure to COVID-19 because of their living situation. Individuals in the above situation should also consider using a respirator. And this is something I won't get into a lot of detail here, but there is a difference between a respirator and a medical mask. And the respirators we're recommending for non-health care providers is called a non-fit tested. You may have heard them called KN95s, but those are name brands. So we're talking about a respirator. We are saving the fit tested for your healthcare providers and the non-fit tested. But in most situations, a medical mask is appropriate and you don't need the respirators, which is good news if you've tried the respirators. They're very difficult to stock and participate in your daily activities. Household members are to wear well-fitting and properly sealed non-fit tested respirators, eye protection, gown and gloves when providing direct care to individuals with suspected or confirmed COVID-19. And that is the only time we recommend it for anybody. For all others, wearing a non-medical mask in crowded outdoor or indoor settings when physical distancing of 2 meters cannot be maintained is still recommended, or in poorly ventilated indoor spaces. It's important to remember the basics. Practice frequent hand hygiene. Avoid crowded indoor spaces. Keep your gatherings small. Self-isolate following a positive COVID-19 test. Being a close contact or with an active or probable case of COVID-19, or if a person has otherwise been directed to self-isolate. Stay at home if you're sick. I am so grateful for the Indigenous communities, public health care providers, community support organizations, and leadership that have played such a substantial role in helping to achieve the vaccination rates in Canada that are among the highest in the world, both in communities and urban settings. Indigenous-led response to COVID are the best practice to reach populations. I recognize the impact on mental wellness and how a pandemic has exacerbated those working day in and day out to keep all of our loved ones safe. Please remember, we do have the Hope for Wellness line should you need it. And thank you for the time you gave us today.
Kim, thank you again for joining us on the FNHMA Town Hall. We so appreciate our partnership and that Indigenous Services Canada steps up for the first 10 minutes of every single show to give us the state of COVID in our nation. So Kim, thank you. Stick around though, because you know what comes at the end of the hour. Questions to the inbox, and I'm quite certain, Kim, that people will have a couple for you. And again, those questions go to FNHMA at ihtoday.ca. Now, let's take a quick break.
I used to feel such shame. It was hard being surrounded by women who trauma and abuse left cruel streaks, violent behaviors, and disconnected ways of loving. And now I'm freeing myself from that shame. This is where our societies, our circles, our connection to the land comes in. Learn to be kind to yourself and to others.
There's lots of bullying at the school that I come from. I ended up in a neck brace. I had a concussion. I got kneed in the back of the head. Sometimes things can get really bad and you think, oh, like there's no point of like being here. The support from people around you has a lot to do with the anxiety and depression. Because I'm different, a lot of people didn't understand. Through acceptance, we find belonging.
There's a harsh world out there telling us who to be, what to be, telling us that we don't deserve love and respect unless we're something we're not. After I got assaulted, after I went through the trauma, I went back home and I connected with my roots and I connected with my family. Their wisdom helped me a lot. My family, my kinship, they rejuvenate my soul. They remind me that I deserve love. Our culture teaches us something powerful, compassion.
There's no such thing as an old addict. You either get clean or you die. I knew I needed to stop for my kids and my grandkids. There is hope and there is people that do care and they do love you. I learned that our culture teaches something very powerful, compassion. Through acts of kindness and compassion, we find meaning in ourselves. I found connection. When we're connected, we're never alone.
I love Soar Above Stigma and the messages of hope, resiliency, connected to culture. Oh, beautiful. You know who else is beautiful? Dr. Brenda Rastool is the CEO of the First People's Wellness Circle and our first co-host of the FNHMA Town Halls. Dr. Brenda Rastool, it's over to you, into the crow's nest.
Thanks, Marion. I am so honored to have the privilege of being the first co-host, and I hope I do a great job. But I have to say, those campaign around Soar Against Stigma, it really touches home about the importance of talking about mental health. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity to do that today, because we know the pandemic has showed us so many of the challenges we've had. We've heard how it's impacted us, our overall health, our overall well-being, and that we need to be able to reach out. We need to talk. We need to find supports, those that are within us, that compassion and that kindness, and how do we bring that out to others? And so today, I want to just take a few minutes to talk about mental wellness before I introduce my guest today. And so I want to remind people that we know so much about how the pandemic has harmed our mental wellness. It's affected our emotions. We're more irritable and we're on edge and sometimes really anxious and worried about things. It's affected our overall mental health. Some of us have felt sad and depressed and really disconnected. And it's affected our relationships. We've missed people. We don't have the opportunity to hear from them and to get their guidance and their support and their encouragement. I think, though, as Indigenous people, the pandemic has really taught us a lot. It has taught us about how our cultural practices and our knowledge and our evidence can really be that light forward in what we need to do to take care of ourselves and our community. And I know things have been challenging in our communities to date, and I thank Kim for reminding us about how much we can use our own knowledge to change and shift things for ourselves. We've seen that, I think the fatigue has been incredible. We're so tired of that. But we also know that when we take care of ourselves, we can find a sense of hope, belonging, meaning, and purpose in our lives. So I want to be able to talk today about resiliency and healing. We've already had the conversations about what it's done to us, how to take care of ourselves, but let's talk about resiliency and healing today. Resiliency really means being able to recover quickly or to spring back, but our communities are already struggling. So we want to be able to spring back better, or we've heard the words recover better. I think we need to know, how can we do this? We need to look at what can we do from the point of healing. So resiliency must go together with healing. We need to be able to think about keeping our minds sharp. Moving from healing goes to making our minds sharper. Our spirits are lifted, our emotions are lighter, and our body is ready to act and to be connected. And so I see that this is an opportunity to start thinking about how can we better equip ourselves to help others in our communities when we take care of our own healing. And so today, our guests are going to talk to us about how we can shift to hope, purpose, meaning, and belonging through love, compassion, and kindness. And so today, I'd like to bring into this conversation Dr. Ed Connors. He is an Indigenous Mohawk psychologist coming to us. And Ed, why don't you come in and share with us some of your ideas around how to do resiliency and healing as we move through this pandemic?
Thank you, Brenda. Appreciate the introduction. I need to add to my introduction so that you actually know better who I am. And as I do so and share with you some of the thoughts that I'm going to share with you today, perhaps you'll come to understand why it's so important to me to give a more full introduction of myself. So in addition to what Brenda introduced me as Ed Connors, I also go by the name of Wabanong Benese Kapituetang, or Wabano Benese Kwikwetchkan. I'm Mohawk Irish ancestry. My mother is born and raised in Ganawage, Mohawk territory. My father in the town of Mount Royal. And so I come from, as I often say to people, from two sides of the river. I'm also Wolf Clan, and so those are all important pieces of telling you who I am. And what I'm going to share with you today is about a little bit more about what I've learned in the last 40 years of my practice as a psychologist, working with our communities across the country, both on and off reserve, in cities and in rural territories. I've come to work over the years with many different elders, healers, and medicine people. And I can say, in addition to what I learned as a psychologist, their teachings became something that gave me the understanding of true health and healing and wellness and what that is really about from our Indigenous worldview. Our Indigenous lens and our Indigenous way of knowing is quite different from that of the Euro-Western way of thinking about health, healing, and wellness. And it is what we would say to be that of a more holistic way of thinking, in which incorporates physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. We've just come through, or we're coming through, I believe, and I'm hopeful that we are coming through now this period of the illness that we've called the pandemic or the COVID pandemic. And we're coming, I think, through it now into a period where we can actually now look back and consider what it has done in impacting our health, healing, and our wellness, and what we can do now going forward to not only regain, but to sustain and build on what we've learned about health, healing, and wellness, especially that from our elders, our healers, and our medicine people. When I think of it about that, I think about it in the frame that I now refer to as life promotion. For many years now, as I've learned from our elders, I've learned about what when they talk about health, healing, and wellness from a holistic lens, that they're really emphasizing the understandings from a positive worldview, that they're emphasizing not the negative, but rather the positive. So, for example, as opposed to speaking about suicide and suicide prevention, which I've done for many years, I've come to a place where I've come to know and understand that we're going to gain far more in succeeding against losing life and what we call prematurely or unnaturally, early beyond the time that the people are meant to pass. And we can do so by actually putting more of our energies and efforts into preventing death than we can from doing so from promoting life, as opposed to putting the emphasis on preventing death. We can't really prevent death. Death is inevitable, but we can indeed promote life, and we can promote long and good life. And that's what our teachings tell us. And that's what I've learned from many of our healers, medicine people, and elders that have sustained and learned our original teachings and those teachings that come from our ancestors from our past. But we now need to bring that way of thinking and understanding into our present. And I've been doing that most recently with a number of people through a program that we've developed called Feather Carriers Leadership for Life Promotion. That way of thinking provides the teachings that sustain life and that promote long and good lives. So from that perspective, I'm going to share with you a piece of our teachings today that actually helps us to understand what we really have as our Indigenous knowledge about promoting life and long and good life. If you could show, please, the slide that I have. This slide is a piece that we've developed in our Feather Carriers teachings that again comes out of the teachings of our ancestors. Interestingly enough, a number of years ago, a group of our Indigenous leaders came together to develop what is called the Mental Wellness Continuum Framework. Brenda was one of those people who was part of that work. I think Chris worked on that as well, and quite a number of others. But that work actually was the culmination of years of efforts that we made, particularly through what was used to be called the Native Mental Health Association of Canada, that now is referred to as the First Peoples Wellness Circle, which Brenda is our CEO for, and I'm on the board as co-chair for the board. So in our work over the years, we wanted to articulate what it is that we mean by mental wellness from an Indigenous framework. And as we did that, we came to understand that it was not really about just mental wellness, but it's about wellness, holistic health and healing, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that's why we changed our name to the First Peoples Wellness Circle. That kind of thinking brought about some core concepts about healing, which speaks to hope, meaning, belonging, and purpose. And that lies within the teachings that are within the Mental Wellness Continuum Framework. In our work with the Feather Carriers, we brought together two pieces of knowledge that actually came about as we were beginning to develop our work and share it across the country. That work was encouraged actually by one of our Indigenous leaders, Senator Murray Sinclair, who was, of course, the chair for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Murray actually brought about the understanding that there, and I heard him speak at one of our Canadian Association of Suicide Prevention conferences where he's a keynote speaker, where he actually brought about these 4 essential questions. And these 4 essential questions are ones that he said are from all time, probably from the beginning of when humans were able to think and reflect on life, and in fact thinking about what is life and what's the meaning of life and how do I live life. These questions are the ones that you'll see on the screen here, which are: where do I come from? Who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? In our work, in the feather carriers, we came to understand and recognize that there is a matching between those questions and actually the 4 concepts of meaning, hope, belonging, and purpose. In fact, if you look at this, what I'm sharing with you on the screen, you'll see that the first question, where do I come from, matches with the understanding of making meaning of life. One of the first things that we learn when we're looking for understanding our teachings is the teachings of the creation stories. Every one of our nations and all around the world, we begin with creation stories that help us to make meaning of life. So that is a beginning of developing, again, an understanding of life, is to understand where do I come from. And these are questions, by the way, that we ask throughout our lives. We will never come to a full understanding of these questions, but the more that we do answer them, the better we are capable to live a long and good life. The second question, who am I, is about belonging and connection. When I introduced myself, I spoke about what my name is, I spoke about my clan, and I spoke about where I come from. These are all pieces that speak to who we are connected to and who we're connected to. And these are parts of answering the understanding of who am I. The third is why am I here, which is really about purpose. We believe in our teachings, that our teachings tell us that Creator created everything for good. Everything has a good purpose to sustain and maintain and promote life. Each of us have that purpose. And so when we understand what our purpose is for being here in life, we promote life. We promote our lives to live a long and good life. And finally, the third is, where am I going? And that's about hope. I say when we think of that and we think about where am I going and we ask that question, it's about visioning. It's about looking forward into the future and being able to see something good that we're going towards or something that's coming towards us that's good. That's what hope is. It's the ability to vision something good. When we can answer these questions, and as we answer these questions, we promote life. And if we do that and promote our lives, we promote our health and wellness as we answer these questions, we then become more resilient to live a long and good life. So these are some of the concepts that I wanted to share with you today to give you some thought about what do we do now as we come out of this experience of this COVID? How can I, in fact, promote myself to live a long and good life and then do so in supporting others to do the same? That's the question I think that we need to be asking at this time. We've done so much now over this time to promote our physical health and well-being in the light of the challenges that we faced with COVID. We now need, I think, to look carefully at what we've learned from this and what we know from our teachings that support us to live long and good lives. So that's what we're doing within our work with feather carriers. This is what I am doing in this primary pieces of my work today. And again, I say I'm thankful to our ancestors who actually have passed this knowledge on to us and that we can now benefit from if we choose to turn to the knowledge that comes from our past in order to not only enhance our health and wellness now, but then into the future. So I say miigwech now for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you, and I wish you all good health and wellness.
Ed, thank you so much. I think there's so much there to unpack, thinking about hope, belonging, meaning, and purpose in those 4 key questions. And I hope we can make sure that that gets put up on the screen again so people can take a look at it. It just gives us a lot of understanding about where do we need to go and how do we need to nurture ourselves and our spirit and our whole health in order to come and spring back and show our resiliency. So thanks so much. Please stick around. There's going to be a question and answer period that Marion's going to have, and we want to hear a bit more. I'm sure people will have lots of questions, so stick around. Thanks again, Ed. Now, I'd really like to call in our next guest, Dr. Chris Musquash, Anishinaabe psychologist from the Thunder Bay area. Chris, come on in.
Again, an honor and privilege to be here with Dr. Connors and Dr. Rastool, who I've known for a long time, and I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for. So Chimigwech for the opportunity to be here. I'm speaking to you today from Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is in the Robinson Superior Treaty area in the territory of the Fort William First Nation. And the Robinson Superior Treaty area stretches across the north shore of Lake Superior and includes my First Nation, Pays Plat First Nation, Pugwashing, which is about an hour and 45 minutes east of Thunder Bay. I grew up in rural northwestern Ontario in Sulak and a mixed ancestry myself, both Anishinaabe on my dad's side and a bit of a mix of Italian and Ukrainian and perhaps some other things on my mom's side. So I'm very, very pleased to be here again to talk today about resilience and talk about healing and talk about wellness, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we think about resilience, which can be a bit of a loaded term, particularly in some of our communities. People, academically sometimes have some difficulty, just sort of trying to be clear and precise about what they mean when they speak about resilience. And I think when we listen to what Dr. Connors had to say, when we listen to what Dr. Rastool had to say, it becomes very, very clear to us that what we're really talking about is the power and the strength in identity and the healing and medicine that comes from that. So, in addition to resilience as a function of mental health outcomes, we know that culturally, physical, emotional, and spiritual outcomes are also very, very important. When we think about those aspects that were presented, hope, belonging, meaning, and purpose, what we're really talking about is those that are the guiding framework for allowing us to be able to pursue wellness and to know how to go about doing that. And again, central to that is who it is, who we are. It's a very, very important piece. Now, in more sort of biomedical based approaches, psychological based approaches to healing, those aspects are there, but they're largely implicit. And what I mean by that is that, if you think of an example, so for example, imagine a grandparent who's used tobacco, smoked cigarettes for 25 years. That person can, make a decision and pursue what needs to be pursued in order to quit smoking when there's a grandchild on the way or something. So we know that their success comes from that because it's embedded, it's part of who they are, that as a grandparent, that they have this goal and this is what they're going to do. Similarly, if you think about perhaps an athlete who's injured herself and requires a surgery, it might be that athlete does, everything that the surgeon says and everything that the physiotherapist says because, she's going to get back on the track or, back in the swimming pool or the diving board or whatever it is as fast as possible. Again, the pathway to health is embedded, within her identity. And those things are explicit and foundational in culture-based approaches and in many Indigenous approaches. As Dr. Connors was talking about, we often start with that story of who we are and where we come from. Going back again to, say, psychological approaches, if you've heard about cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, we talk about schema. And those schema are those representations, emotions, memories, feelings, behaviors, etc., that sort of comprise who it is you are. Very, very similar. When you think about acceptance and commitment therapy, for example, it comes from a values base. When you think about dialectical behavior therapy, for example, they talk about life worth living goals. So again, these implicitly really aim to drive at the question as to who is it that we are. And when we can understand those things and we can utilize them as the foundation for wellness, then a lot of things can happen. So, those approaches are part of, I think, what's going to those foundational aspects of identity are part of what's going to help us to be resilient coming out of this period, this pandemic, when we're able to do so in a safe way. And I think that, one of the important ways in which we do that is we share our stories. Stories are very, very important. Stories are, we talked about, soaring above stigma, for example. Well, the way we soar above stigma is through the use of stories. We share stories with each other. We understand where each other have been. This is also how we heal. We share stories. We talk about the things that have troubled us. We talk about our difficulties. We talk about our traumas with other people who know that. And we can talk to elders or other cultural people, healers. We can talk to psychologists or counselors or others as well. And the mechanism of action by which telling those stories seems to help is that, well, two things. The first one is that we're having the opportunity to process and be exposed to that which really troubles. And we're able to do that in the context of a sound relationship. But importantly, what we begin doing is putting together a narrative. And that narrative, as we organize that story and we organize that narrative and all the emotions that go along with it and all the thoughts that go along with it, are part of where we make meaning out of it. So in that way, those types of approaches, those types of talk-based approaches, conversational approaches that are grounded in relationship, that are grounded in developing a narrative and making meaning. Well, these are very, very old technologies. These are very, very old technologies, and there's a tremendous amount of expertise in our communities when it comes to how to go about doing this in a good way. So I think, when we talk about again, being resilient in the context of this pandemic, these are things that we know. It's also things that have been disrupted. So, Dr. Rastool talked about, the difficulty in spending time with family, spending time with friends. That's where those stories live. And when we don't have the opportunities for those things to be undermined. Other things that have been undermined as well include sort of self-efficacy, like your individual belief in your ability to do something that you set yourself to do. A pandemic undermines that significantly. Similarly, agency and self-determination. When we're feeling as though things are outside of our control, those things are undermined. And those things are also undermined historically, through different colonial processes, right? So when it comes to, again, beginning to determine what are the necessary ingredients for being resilient and coming out of a period of distress and difficulty and loss and grief and trauma and all of the things that we've experienced and that our communities are experiencing, that those culture-based approaches that are founded on who it is we are, fundamentally on our identity, that utilize the technology of speaking with each other in the context of a relationship, that allow us to weave together and make meaning outside of all of those experiences, but as well to belong with others who've had similar experiences, such that we can know that we're not by ourselves in this, become very, very, very powerful medicines and very, very powerful ways in which we can begin to heal from this experience. So again, Chi Miigwech for the opportunity to be here and share some thoughts. And I see Dr. Rastool is back. So very, very pleased again to be here. And I look forward to the question period as well.
Thanks, Chris. What you share with us about self-efficacy and recognizing what's within our control, I think, are really important messages. And I am hopeful that we're going to hear some more questions about how do we take care of ourselves and how do we do those things within natural law to help care for our well-being. So stick around for the Q&A, and I'm sure we'll have some questions for you. We all have that ability to find hope in our lives, that at the end of it, we will all be together, that there's hope, belonging, meaning, and purpose through our creation stories, through our practices, and through our knowledge. And so with that, let's take a short break.
There's a harsh world out there telling us who to be, what to be, telling us that we don't deserve love and respect unless we're something we're not. After I got assaulted, after I went through the trauma, I went back home and I connected with my roots and I connected with my family. Their wisdom helped me a lot. My family, my kinship, they rejuvenate my soul. They remind me that I deserve love. Our culture teaches us something powerful, compassion.
There's no such thing as an old addict. You either get clean or you die. I knew I needed to stop for my kids and my grandkids. There is hope and there is people that do care and they do love you. I learned that our culture teaches something very powerful, compassion. Through acts of kindness and compassion, we find meaning in ourselves. I found connection. When we're connected, we're never alone.
I used to feel such shame. It was hard being surrounded by women who trauma and abuse left cruel streaks, violent behaviors, and disconnected ways of loving. And now I'm freeing myself from that shame. This is where our societies, our circles, our connection to the land comes in. Learn to be kind to yourself and to others.
There's lots of bullying at the school that I come from. I ended up in a neck brace. I had a concussion. I got kneed in the back of the head. Sometimes things can get really bad and you think, there's no point of being here. The support from people around you has a lot to do with the anxiety and depression. Because I'm different, a lot of people didn't understand. Through acceptance, we find belonging.
Welcome back from the break, everybody. Back to the Cree Princess from Papa First Nation. Let's take a peek in that inbox. I do want to tell you that Dr. Brenda Ristool and the First People's Wellness Circle are coming back for another episode of the FNHMA Town Hall because mental wellness is so important. We can't have physical wellness, and we know our quadrants need to be balanced, right? That's what this is all about. And I have to say, everybody who is listening, watching, you are loved, you are special, and you belong. Now, we do have a couple of questions, and I'm going to go take a couple of questions, and I'm going to go back to Dr. Ristool to give us some final comments as well. So, again, reminder, this is not our only session on mental wellness, so keep flooding that inbox at FNHMA at ihtoday.ca. There are more questions than we have time, so we'll make sure that we bring these questions forward on the next edition of Mental Wellness with Dr. Brenda Ristool. So I'm going to set this out for the panel. I want to ask, lots of people are first applauding that we are talking about mental wellness. Ed, you already know that you have a number of people who are so delighted to be hearing about holistic wellness, our connection to land. Dr. Chris, thank you so much for reminding us that we are resilient. We've gotten this far and we'll make it together. So here's our first question. Feel free to, it's going to be like Jeopardy. Who's going to be the first to unmute that button? The pandemic has put such a strain and worry in our lives for such a long time now. How can you provide a bit of guidance for people who are seeking supports and are looking for ways to channel these emotions in healthy ways? So how do we channel this uncertainty, fear, anxiety into something positive? So I'm going to say, Dr. Ristool, do you want to come in and take a crack at that question?
Let's see if my internet will let me stay. I so apologize. I think one of the things that we can do is do things that are within our control. Do things that we have an ability, an efficacy to make change on. So perhaps it's learning something new, or embracing something that we already had a skill in that perhaps we've put down because of work and other demands on our life. So when we start to make perhaps changes in our health by looking at our physical well-being or we start to eat better, or we start to pick up beading. We start to pick up going out on the land and relearning how to snare or going ice fishing. Things that are within our control to make changes on, things that we could improve in our life, I think are ways that we could start to feel like we are connecting to our sense of our well-being. I think one of the other things is using ceremonial practices that we have that we can do in our own home, whether that is praying, making tobacco ties. I had an elder once tell me when there is times of struggle, make a tobacco tie every day and carry that tobacco tie in your pocket and hold it in your hand when you're struggling. Give prayers to that. Ask the Creator for support and assistance during those times. And at the end of each day, go out onto the land, put it in a fire, by a tree, by the water, and give thanks for that day. And ask the Creator to take those things that are out of your control, to take care of those, and to remind us that we're part of something bigger. So I think we can use our practices when we boil cedar, when we smudge. Those are all other ways of giving to the Creator what we can't do. And finally, I would say finding connection to people and to land are all important ways that we can find ways of getting through this time. And maybe I'll give some time to Chris and Ed, who might have some ideas as well.
Who's going first, Chris?
Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. So I would reinforce everything that you said, Brenda. That again, and it's interesting because what you said also, unfortunately, when you got cut out by the winds, you missed what Chris had to say, which was really speaking in many ways to how we change our ways of thinking. And as you say, you put it into the terms of that we use the ability we have to control our own lives. And change the thinking that, from a perspective of that we're not in control and we don't have any control of anything, but rather that recognize what we do have control of and actually then act on that as you suggest. I go as far as even to say when we speak about giving thanks to Creator, I go from the perspective of that I give thanks for everything I have every day. I offer in first thing in the morning. I give thanks for life, for the life I have. And I look through and I think about and I give thanks for all those different things that I have and that support my life. And so it's changing the way we think that makes probably, I think, the biggest change that we need today, which is to make that shift in thinking from hopelessness to actually, visioning the good that's both here and the good that is yet to come. So those are the perspectives I think that we need right now, and we need it as strong, not only for ourselves but for each other and for all of creation. Chris?
Thanks. And I think if I could add, one of the things that we can also do is recognize that what we're experiencing is distressing, and then do the things that we can do to help manage that distress as best as possible. And many of those lessons come again from our ancestors. They come right from the land. So when you think about, what lessons from the land can we bring inside into our homes, we can bring inside, ensuring that our days are structured. We can bring inside ensuring that we're sleeping, we're prioritizing our sleep. We can bring inside the physical activity, and we can be attentive as reasonably as possible, knowing that there are different constraints on people with respect to food security, etc. But we can do the very best we can do to eat those things that we know are nourishing and good for us. And if we do those things, those four things that natural world gives to us as lessons, and we bring those into our homes, that's how we can help also to manage something that's very distressing, and then come from a place, as Dr. Stool and Dr. Connors was saying, that we can begin to activate all of those other things that we know and all those other things that we aspire to. So,
I'm going to take another dive into the inbox. And again, if you have a question about mental wellness, this isn't the only show we're going to have on it. So get those into FNHMA at ihtoday.ca. So many questions. Let's go to... Okay, here's one for you guys. Where can people find cultural supports? Where do we look? I know it's going to depend on where we are in Turtle Island, but I know we referenced the Hope for Wellness hotline. Where are some other places that we can go? Maybe your websites? What do we do if we want to seek out some cultural supports? And do you guys go speak to organizations? Over to our expert panels. Ed, I know you're unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So there are many. And I mentioned our feather carriers work that we're currently doing, and we have a program that we offer that it provides cultural teachings around life promotion. That's a program that's offered over a period of a year. So that kind of that's one of the places. We have the sites for First Peoples Wellness Circle. We also have a site for Thunderbird Partnership Foundation, which is thunderbirdpf.org. Brenda, ours is what? First People's Wellness Circle. So it's FPWC?
FPWC.ca.
.ca. Thank you. And then we also have a site that's kind of interesting that's on life promotion that we've developed called wisepractices.ca. And those are, in that site, you can find some really powerful resources from our communities. I think we have now 9 teachings, examples of life promotion from our communities across the country, covering a wide range of the ways in which we can, as both individuals as well as community and family, can enhance life promotion. And so that one is wisepractices.ca. And in that, you'll actually find now also a piece that actually speaks to promoting health and wellness or promoting life from an Indigenous worldview for our youth. And that program has just recently been added into that site. It's a really, I think, a very good toolkit that can be utilized to support life promotion with our youth across the country. So those are just some of the ones that I'm familiar with. Chris or Brenda?
Yes, no, I think that those are, ones I'm familiar with as well. I think the other thing is thinking through formal versus informal supports. Like, who are those people who who you can draw upon for those types of teachings. And I think we've seen examples throughout the pandemic in our communities of people really prioritizing connectedness and culture. And so again, those things require that we speak with each other, and that we become familiar with those around us. Those who are called upon in our communities during difficult times are often ones who can help, and that knowledge is there. And then the other piece that I would say, and Brenda talked about this a moment ago, is going outside. There's a lot of teachings that will come to you if you go outside and you really pay attention. And that can be a very important source of strength and wellness as well.
Thank you, Dr. Musquash. Dr. Ristoul, some closing and final thoughts from you?
Thanks, Marian. I'm happy to do that. I'll just make one comment that go look locally and regionally. There are Indigenous organizations that host a bunch of different types of workforces in treatment centers, in mental wellness teams, and in the Indian Residential School Resolution Health Support Workers. All of those have cultural support workers that could support you if you are looking for something connected to an organization. But I do agree with Chris, there are things within our backyard and in our communities. So my final words is really a story. And my story is one about community connection. And I think it applies whether it was at the start of the pandemic or as we move through the pandemic. And it is about how do we ignite our spirit? And how do we support that fire from within us? And I think one of those things is what this community did. We heard from an elder on the East Coast that at the start of the pandemic and throughout the pandemic, they recognized people would not feel a connection to others and maybe lose a connection to themselves. And so every morning they made an agreement that those who could would go out onto their porch, into their front yard, and had a drum, and they would drum. And they would hear the drum from every corner of the community. And in that drum is an opportunity to connect you to a heartbeat, connect you to each other, and connect you to a sense that you're not alone, and connect you to a realization that there is always somebody there to help and support whenever you need it. And when you feel alone, that the drum is there. And that is mother, that's the heartbeat of our mother, the heartbeat of Mother Earth that allows you to go out and be connected. And so when I think about the words that we heard from Dr. Musquash and from Dr. Connors, it is important to find a sense of being connected, to knowing that there are those in our community who are always available and ready to support us. And that when we turn within to our own sense of control of who we are, where we come from, we can find hope, belonging, meaning, and purpose in our lives. And that is really the intention of all of the work that we're doing here today. And so I just wish to thank everybody who does that, because every one of us are a caretaker in our community.
Those were amazing, amazing final words, Dr. Rastool. Thank you, Dr. Musquash, Dr. Connors, Dr. Rastool, everybody at Indigenous Health Today and Nation Talk, and of course the FNHMA family. I do want to say, as we're thanking folks, if you want more information on where you can see previous town halls, or if you missed part of this one, or if you want to listen in on a future, please go to the ihtoday.ca website, and you're going to want to do a / for town halls, and you'll see our Facebook partners and live broadcasters. With that, hi.